Now I'm going to move you guys over and move this one over, and forgive me for my chintzy way of presenting, but I present this way more often than not. So today's going to be no exception. So everybody, welcome to this session. There are a couple of things that are in the Power BI desktop that do more than just border AI. Some of them flat out take advantage behind the scenes of some machine learning, and we're not always even aware of that. So we're going to go through that now. I did give Michael my slides in PDF form because I do have quite a few of them. Some of them I'll be going through pretty quickly, so feel free to get that. This is a little bit about me. I'm a Power BI MVP, and I've written a couple books on business intelligence in the Microsoft Dynamics GP product in the past. And I have a YouTube channel, and so that information is there below. And if you get the slide deck, you'll have access to it as well. And I'll tell you at the end, I have something coming up next week you might be interested in. So I want to point out a little bit of housekeeping first. What we're going to be looking at my Power BI is from the Microsoft Store. That's where I get my Power BI. This is the version that I'm using. So I always like to show that just in case it varies a little bit from yours, because we all know just a few months ago, they really changed the ribbons a lot. And every now and then I still have to do a little hunt and peck to find where something is in the new place or what it may be called. But this is what I use. If you do not use Power BI from the Microsoft Store, this is one of my soapbox things. I strongly encourage it. If you get it from the Microsoft Store, as opposed to downloading it, it will automatically install updates for you. And that's a pretty big deal if you have quite a few people. And I know a lot of IT departments don't like to open up the store, but it's a big time saver if everybody is always on the latest version and nobody has to do installs, because there's nothing more frustrating than to have a report. And I experience this when I'm working. I work with a lot of Microsoft partners. That's usually who I work with the most. And I go into even their office or one of their customers, and I have a report built and they're on a version way old and the report won't work. So I love the fact that it automatically installs for me. Several of the things I'm going to show you today are considered in preview. They're not the kind of preview you have to turn on. So you should always look for anything that's in preview and be very careful about using it because it can change. Some of the stuff that I'm showing you today that's in preview, though, the likelihood of it changing dramatically, I feel like, is pretty small, but just keep that in mind. This is our agenda. We're going to be looking specifically at 4 things inside of the Power BI desktop. And one of them is Q&A, specifically Q&A tooling. I know a lot of people already use Q&A, or at least have played with it and just kind of put it aside, but Q&A is something I'm really excited and really passionate about. And so we're going to be spending probably the bulk of our time in Q&A, because I'm going to stop and tell you how you can optimize your reports and your data for Q&A, because if you do it for Q&A, all of the other ones will also be optimized. So the optimizing, even though we're covering it under Q&A, it's really for everything. We're going to look at insights in the desktop. Some of you may be familiar with the quick insights in the Power BI service, but we're going to look specifically at insights. A lot of people call it explain the increase or decrease. Then we're going to look at the 2 newest visuals, the key influencers visual and the decomposition tree visual. And the decomp tree is probably my favorite all-time visuals. I just love it. But coming from originally, my degree is actually in marketing, although oddly enough, I went to work selling and implementing accounting software. But I love the key influencer one as well, because it really changes where you are in your Power BI. So before we start looking at the detail, and we're going to be spending a lot of time in demos, I want to talk about why AI is important. And if you look at this chart, we have going across left to right, we have the traditional Power BI, or traditional BI in general, and advanced analytics. And the more you get advanced in your analytics, the higher the business value you're going to get. Although also there's a certain degree of difficulty, and then you could see that going from bottom to top. And most analytics or reports usually start with hindsight. They're looking at, hey, what happened? And these we typically call descriptive analytics. If you move up that chart for that optimization line, you move up to diagnostic analytics, which is why did it happen? So we're trying to figure out why did it happen? And that's some of the stuff we're going to be uncovering today. Why did it happen? And then you keep moving. What's happening right now? That's streaming analytics. To me, that's really not much different than descriptive analytics, because with Power BI, we can really see things up to real time or as of the last refresh, depending on how you connect to your data. And in a lot of scenarios, I know in the world of accounting, more often than not, yesterday, if it's not a Fortune 1000 company, if you have reports up through yesterday, that is considered real time for accounting. Then we move into predictive analytics. What will happen? So we're trying to figure out what will, that's another area that a lot of people don't get into. And then finally, we have prescriptive analytics. What will make it happen? And we're not going to get into prescriptive analytics too much, but we can get in to find out some diagnostic, why did it happen, that could help us change. How do we make something happen in the way we want it to occur? So that's what we're going to get into next. So we're going to start with Q&A, and specifically the Q&A tooling bar. I do want to point out, in this particular product, you do have to have Power BI Pro or Power BI Premium to use all of the features that I'm going to show you. Not all of them are require those. So when we get into this product or into Power BI, we're going to be looking at Q&A tooling, and we're going to be specifically, how do we teach Q&A? How do we manage the terms? How do we review questions, suggest questions, and then how do we do some modeling on that? So what I'm going to do is pull up my first Power BI report, which will probably open on the wrong monitor, and it is. So forgive me for looking to the left. I'm in my temporary COVID-19 desk. All right, had to give up my bedroom. Okay, so, and sorry, my husband just brought me a nice diet soda. Okay, we're gonna be looking at this report. And in this report, if we look on the right, we have 4 different queries. One of them is just a date query that I created using DAX. But we have a clothing query, and the clothing query is basically, these are the things we carry in our inventory. We're a boutique store. So we have the clothing one. We have the rating from our customers. They give us a satisfaction level rating. And then we have our sales, and the rating is related to the sales. So we could see what it is we sold, and you notice we have quite a few measures in here as well. So we have just nice little report here by revenue. Our clothings, we can look at our clothing items either by division or by department. So we have that as well. I'm going to go ahead and just move to my next tab, which is basically the same thing with that big report missing. And we're going to start talking about, I want to make sure I stay on track. I get excited sometimes. And we're going to start talking about Q&A. So the Q&A, I'm just going to add in the Q&A visual right here. So you guys are familiar with the Q&A already, I've no doubt, because it's probably one of the cool things that everyone, when they start looking at, they're like, ooh, look, we have Q&A, this is pretty cool. So we have Q&A, and it has some suggested questions based off of what Power BI sees in our data set. So it tries to take the data, and this is another reason why setting the data type is important, because it also then figures out how to use them and what they might mean. So we know we can ask a question. It uses Bing natural language, query language technology to answer the questions. That's a little bit of AI itself there, that it could interpret our questions into something that is meaningful enough to Power BI to render a result. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is just start typing in a question. I want to stay in order. What is total sales by class name? So I'm going to type that question in, and we can know, or we know by looking at it, that total sales and class name are obviously fields inside of our data set. So if I come over to the right, I could see total sales. That's a measure that I created right there. And I could also see I have class names. So that's exactly what we expect. And we know because it's blue and it's highlighted, we could click on it and change it to total cost or whatever it is we want to, oh, there's total cost. So I could also try that one. And we know we can get it, get whatever we want to get out of that. Okay, so let me clean that up a little. Okay, so we have that done. The next thing that I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to type in something that it doesn't quite get. So I'm going to type in show volume by division name. And it doesn't know what to do with that. So it's just displaying the division name because that's what it recognizes. We only have 4 divisions. We can see those 4 divisions in the visual in the top right-hand corner, but it doesn't know what to do with volume, and it's red and it's underlined. So what we're going to do is use Q&A tooling to help us define what volume means. Now we know we could change it if we wanted to, but we don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is click on, we have 2 different icons here. One of them will enable us to make this a permanent visual, but the other one will open up the Q&A tooling. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and the tooling window will open up automatically. And I'm going to go into Teach Q&A, and now the sentence that I was displaying appears, and I could see the volume field is highlighted in red. So I could define exactly what I want volume to mean, because volume is not a field anywhere out there. So I'm going to change this to mean quantity. So I want to see, when I say show me the volume by division name, I want to see the quantity, and I could see the results it's going to give. And I'm going to go ahead and click on save there. So I save that. And then you'll also notice on the pane on the left, we have these field synonyms. And if I were to open up my sales and scroll down, I can see all of my fields. Here's quantity. And now volume is listed as a synonym for quantity. So now I know when I say volume, I'm really meaning quantity. And when I come back to this window, it's going to automatically reset that to be by division name. So I can train Q&A to think the way I want it to think, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to come in and do another one. Show sales by sentiment. Okay. And it's like, I'm thinking you might mean the text, but I don't know. So what I'm going to do again is just click on that. And now it's telling me, hey, I'm not sure what you mean. Try another term or define it. So I'm going to click here, and it's going to open up that same window again, and I could go ahead and define it. This time, though, I'm going to come in and do a field synonym this way. I'm going to go to ratings, and the rating score right here. Actually, I want to use satisfaction. I'm going to just come in and add, and I'm going to call this sentiment. And now, when I go back, I could see the sentiment listed, and it was a right guess that I could see that, but it now recognizes that. So if I come back to Teach Q&A, I don't have anything listed there because it recognizes that that sentiment is a synonym for satisfaction. Oh, that's a tongue twister. Okay. Now, as you start having people in your organization using Power BI, particularly using Power BI in the Power BI service, and they start using Q&A and they start running into problems, you can come to review questions and you could see a list of those problems. Now, it only displays the last 28 days of problems or so. Looks like it's actually, oh, it hasn't been refreshed in a while. That's why. I'm not going to refresh it now because those will disappear. But I could fix these problems if I want to. And right now I'm looking at all data sets. You could choose a particular filter data set if you want to, but you can come in and define how you want them to go. So for example, if this one has a fix that's needed. If I come in and open this up, I could say, all right, the happiness is the satisfaction, and teams will refer to, let's just say, customer. Is that right? Do I have customer? What do I have over here? Yeah, we'll just say customer age. So now I have corrected that. So that one should no longer appear. I have a sneeze teasing me. So if I mute quick, you might know why. Okay, so I'm going to come back into my review questions, and now that one has been corrected. And so you can work on correcting these and really hone in on what you want to do. And that's a good thing, because you want to get the terminology that people are using. Not everybody uses the same terminology that comes from your data set, like customers. They could be called guests. They could be called anything. They could be called clients. So they could be called partners. So you want to make sure that you deal with that. So we have where we can manage terms. These are terms we've set today. And so you can see that we have all of these today. There is no way to edit these terms. If you accidentally make a mistake, you have to delete them and then re-add them. But you could manage all of your terms. You could manage the synonyms, or you could teach the Q&A. So these are all the things that we've looked at so far. Now I'm going to close this out.
Linda, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
From your experience, so I noticed that there were a couple there that had the word happiness misspelled. Would you go take the time of correcting that, or would you just sort of ignore that and say, well, you know?
No, I would probably just ignore it. Yeah.
If you can't spell it correctly, then we're not going to worry about it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, I did that deliberately so I'd have things in there in this little my fake world. But yes, I would probably ignore it because chances are they recognize they misspelled. If that's the case, they misspelled the word and they probably corrected it. Yeah. So I'm going to go in. There's one more thing I want to show you inside of that, but I'm going to go into my third page for a moment, because I've been thinking a lot about how we as Power BI professionals, as BI professionals, and get people to have better user adoption of Power BI. How do we get users to do that? And this was something I thought a lot about, and I love this. So you can build a page in a report like this that, as you give to individuals, where they could kind of create their own report based off of Power BI. So all I did was add Power BI visuals, 4 of them, to this particular page. And so they could pick one of these, like top class names by total cost. And if that's one they like, they could just turn it into a permanent visual. And now this is their custom page. And so that's easy enough done. But the question is, what if these questions that are suggested don't really represent what you want them to do? So we're going to go in and use the tooling to suggest our own questions. So I'm going to open up the tooling, and I'm going to come over to suggested questions. This is the only other area we haven't been in yet. And we're going to ask our first suggested question. Now, I want to point out that once you add one suggested question or one question yourself, the suggested questions that you see here are going to disappear. And oh, and thank you for asking that question, Michael, as I start copying in these questions. And feel free, anyone, to do that. Just come off mute and holler at me. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so I enter in this first one. I have nothing I need to correct. I can see the preview. I'm going to go ahead and click on add. Now I'm going to start seeing all my questions appear here. So I'm going to just keep pasting some of these in.
While you're pasting that in, we did have a question.
Okay.
Asking, can you limit who can create synonyms?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, actually, if they're accessing it on the Power BI service, they're not going to have access to the Q&A tooling anyhow. So that's one way. Yep. So that would probably be the easiest way. That's a good question, though. And I'm sorry I don't have a specific answer on that.
No, I hadn't done it yet. I was not yet. I had a webinar that came on. Let me go back to my golden buzzer. Let me go back to the page just a minute.
Can you tell who that is?
Do I do donate or tickets? So I'm looking at ticket, and I've got +1.
Oh, there you go.
I have a promotional code. Do I have a promotional code?
I think that's
And
Ida.
consider adding a donation. I put 50 in there, or it's already
Can you
50.
mute her?
No, it's already 50. So I put my name.
I can't mute her.
Well, can you grab that?
Okay, there I'm putting a mobile number and my email.
Yes, I
She's
can.
the only one I see who's not muted.
All right.
Sorry about that, Belinda.
No, no big deal. Thanks.
You got it.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of that A1 there. Okay, so now that I have all of these added, if you want to change the order in which they appear, all you have to do is basically do a drag and drop. So if I want the gross margin by sentiment to be first, I just rearrange my suggested list. And then I go ahead and click on save. And now when I come back into the Power BI desktop, the questions that were there are gone. Now I see my suggested ones. So you can see the gross margin, my sentiment is first. And then when I open up, I can select which ones I want. So your users can come in and basically make their own dashboard. And I love this idea. I'm anxious to hear some people give this a shot. I would love to get some feedback on that, you know, who's using it, who likes it, and so forth. So, but I think this is a cool way because then you give some people some control over how they want to see their data. All right, so that's Q&A. Now I'm gonna flip back over here for a moment, and I left the space blank. I also want to show you a couple other things. So one of the things that I want to show you is right here. You could also add a Q&A by going insert and Q&A. That's another way to get the Q&A in. Just wanted to show you that. But I also want to show you if you go to insert. So let's say I have this visual. Let me do it like this. Let's say this is my page, but I want to add some Q&A capabilities here. If you go to insert and buttons, you could also add a Q&A button. Now I'm going to make this a little bigger. And I'm gonna just tuck it right there. And because I like to put a background color on, I'm going to take that visual and turn off the background on it so that it just kind of blends in. And if you want to, of course, you could change the color on the icon itself so that it matches whatever color theme you may have. So now that you have this, in the Power BI service, you can just click on it, but in the Power BI desktop, you have to click and do a control. And then Q&A becomes a pop-up window inside of your Power BI. And a lot of people don't know that that exists. And I love that feature. So that's a great way if you don't have a lot of room, but you want to give some people the ability to do some Q&A. And so now I'm back at my suggested questions. And there is no way to pin this down because this is just for pop-up use and review. So that's a pretty cool thing that you could do. All right, so a lot of people don't know, like I said, that that exists. Now, there is another way that in the desktop that you could set up synonyms. And that particular method is by going to the modeling area. So I'm going to go to the modeling area and I'm going to choose, let's say I want to go to, I'm going to go to ratings over here. And in ratings, there is, when you select a query, you get this property pane here. And there is a synonym area here as well. So I have satisfaction. You notice now sentiment is one of my synonyms because I populated that, as is happiness. You saw me add that to the Q&A tool. I could also come in and just be separate with commas, also make it loyalty and whatever other ones that I want. So if I were to come back in and let's see, let's change this from sentiment to loyalty. Oh, you do have to spell it right. Important safety feature. Okay, so let's try it again. Loyalty. Did I misspell it? Oh, yeah, I misspelled it. I probably misspelled it in the other place. I have terrible spelling, which is why I always read it. Let's go back to it. Satisfaction. Oh, I didn't save it. Loyalty. There we go. I'm going to cheat. Just copy that. Okay. Now, there we go. Now I saved it. There it is. So let's come back. Do shift return. And instead of by division name, we'll do loyalty. And so now I have that done. So you can put synonyms in 2 different areas, and it definitely is worth the time. Normally, I suggest to people that when you create your columns or you're doing your data modeling, that you take the time to name it in your company's tribal language or nomenclature, so that if you're a hotel, no manager in the hotel is going to do a lookup for customers. All of them are going to be doing a lookup for guests, unless they're looking at restaurants. And then still they might look at diners, or they might look at, I forgot what they call that, tables, or whatever a ticket would be. So that is something that you really want to take the time to do. But this is a great way to continue adding to it so that it becomes much more powerful to people, setting that in. Okay, so let me go back to my slide deck for just a moment. There are some notes that I want to bring up. So again, the Q&A, it works with the Bing technology. Those review questions only show you through the last 28 days. So you want to make a habit of looking at that every week to see if there's anything new that's out there. If you hide a field in the Power BI, and this would be an example of if we are joining something by date, it makes sense to hide one of the dates so there's not 2 of them. Or you might hide some fields that are only used for calculation in DAX, because DAX can use a hidden field. Q&A cannot read a hidden field. So keep that in mind if you were to hide a field. In the managed terms, you can only review or delete right now. I already talked about that. So you would either have to, if you make a mistake on a synonym, you'd have to delete it and then retrain it. Adding one suggestion will remove all the auto-generated ones. And I also showed you that the order they appear, the suggested questions are the order they will display. Okay, so this is the area where I wanted to, where it feels like we're spending more time in Q&A than the other ones. It's because I want to talk about best practices. So you want to make sure that you have relationships for everything. So if there are any missing relationships, go ahead and add them. In the tables and the column names, use spaces. So you can see here, I have customer space summary as opposed to customer summary, all one word. Now that might make sense. I always say build a report for the dumbest person in the company. But what I'm really saying is the most technologically challenged. And if you are a designer, that's who you need to embrace. That's who you need to help be your tester. And so if they use Q&A or they use a lot of things, they're not going to type in customer summaries in New York. They're going to say show customers in New York. And in this particular example, customer summary versus customers, customer space summary will still acknowledge that customers might be what, that might be what you're looking for. And even renaming the table, if you have something called employee table and it's meant to represent your consultants, call it consultant table. Don't call it the employee table. Because if you say show all consultants or show all unique consultants, that may not give you the same thing as show all employees. So you want to make sure that you are getting all of those names redone. Make sure your data types are correct. That's what I have, what I call Belinda's 3 rules to data modeling. The first 3 things you should always do. Rename the query to something that makes sense using those spaces. And the next one is get rid of unnecessary columns. If you think you don't need it, get rid of it and use that choose column so that it's a step you can go back and easily re-add one. And then the third one is make sure the data types are correct, because that's how your data is going to act, not display. So if you wanted to summarize in a bar chart, for example, then you want to make sure that it is something that can summarize or count do a distinct count or a regular count in a bar chart, for example. Then we have, did I go too far? No, I didn't. Okay. And then we also have, if it's a geographical field or a date field, go through and set those categories properly, especially geographical fields, because your Q&A can render a map. And so you want to make sure you have those set. And if any of you don't know where we're doing that, then we could, where to do that, then we can definitely hit it up at the end. And then you will also want to take the time to sort your columns. And again, this is something you do in the data view in Power BI. So for example, months, best example, that way you can have them sort chronologically instead of alphabetically. And then you want to normalize your data. And so now I want to talk about what I mean by normalizing data. And this is a really big thing. And this has a tremendous amount to do with data modeling. So the worst thing you could do is have a giant flat file of your data. You want to take the time, put it in some organized schema, preferably a star schema, which is one of the most common ones used, because each unique thing that a user asks about should be exactly one object. And that object could be a whole table or it could be a column. So you want to make sure that you have it set accordingly. And I'll go through and give you some specific examples in a moment. But you want to make sure you create new tables and multi-column entities like sales, could be a query, query, and customer contact, a separate query. If they are come in as one giant flat file, you probably want to separate them out. Power or Q&A will benefit from them being in separate queries as opposed to one giant one. And sometimes though, normalizing is denormalizing. You might want to create some unions or do some appends so that you have one giant query as to several of them. So let's go through and talk about what I'm meaning. So let's talk about the denormalizing first. So in this case, on the left, it might be a little hard to see if it is, my apology, we have like a book tour. There are 3 tours that we're doing. We've got the book name, we've got the author, and then there's a column for the 3 cities that they're going on. And in this case, we want to really denormalize it. So the cities are in a separate query altogether, and they could have the tour ID, so you can make the union. But there's only one column of city, because if I say, what city are we going to the most? Q&A is not going to be able to understand that there are 3 separate cities, and nor are the other tools that we're going to be looking at today. They're not going to be able to understand that these 3 separate columns really represent the same thing. So you want, in this case, denormalize it in this particular fashion. We also want to get rid of property bags. So let's take a look at on the right. Oh boy, that was inconsistent of me doing it on the right. That's what you get when you let PowerPoint do the design for you. So the one on the right needs work. So we have a customer ID, and in this particular case, there are 4 rows for each customer ID. One of the columns is the property, and the other one is the value. So you really need to do a pivot of that so that you get 1 row per customer, and instead of 4 rows, those individual custom fields are all put in this way, because a Q&A is not going to be able to say, if we said how many of our customers are male, it's not going to be able to get the information in this particular format, because it is not one entity, or it is not one query, it is not one column. If we keep moving on, in this particular case, we occasionally find we need to split fields. So here we have customers and we have their full address. Well, if I want to maybe chart out things like how many contacts we had with this customer, our customers in London, then we're not going to be able to get it this way, because it's not a full entity. It is a portion of one. And so this is a better way to do it. So if you want the full address still, you can still have it, but break it out if you can. And it's too easy to do in the query editor. And then finally, oh, here we are back on the left. In this particular case, we have different in this case, it looks like maybe concerts that we're doing. And each concert we're going to be presenting on with different composers. And as we're looking at this, they're separated by columns. Well, again, it's not going to be able to understand that, because we're not going to be able to say, hey, what concert are we going to be looking at Paul McCartney? Because Paul McCartney is not a separate entity. So we're breaking it out and normalizing the data in this particular fashion. And doing this is going to be better for you no matter what it is that you're doing. And here's a better example of denormalizing data. So in this particular case, we have the flights. And because we have an arrival, each flight has an arrival airport and a departure airport, they might end up connecting to the same airport link, and it would create an inactive link. Now we know using DAX, we can connect and create information on inactive links. We can call on them, but Q&A can only recognize the active link, and there can only be one active link. So a better way to do that would be, well, exactly what we did here. Sorry. We have the arrival airport and the departure airport as separate fields. So instead of saying how many arrivals or how many airports flights do we have departing from Nashville, then in that particular case, we can actually look it up and see. So these are some things that are going to help you in your Q&A journey and really help you with some of the other things that we're about to talk about next. Are there any specific questions on some of that?
Yeah, so we did have a few questions. Somebody was asking, so going back to what you're typing in with teens, as they were asking, like, could you use that as a filter? So whereas you used teens as a synonym for customer age, could you, would you have to like create certain age brackets in your data model in order to do that?
Yes, you would. You would have to create age brackets in order for it to work out. And that would be part of that normalizing, because it's not going to go through and recognize, well, you could say teens those are always going to recognize one particular query or one particular column. So you would have to normalize your data. If you want to be able to acknowledge teens, you would have to normalize your data by creating another field. And it could be a measure actually that you create that says, hey, and that's a great use for a measure. I like that. Oh, I love that. I always love good ideas because I'm doing a new series on tiny tips. Teams Q&A, I might do that one. Okay, so you could go through and say, all right, I have a measure that I'm doing where in my measure, I am, where's the age? Oh, here it is, right here. So in my measure, I'm reviewing, let me come in this way and open up the sales. Okay, so in my measure, I'm coming through and I'm saying, all right, I'm gonna look at the age columns and I'm gonna filter for all rows, and I'm gonna go in and say, if it is, between or under the age of, because in theory, I guess we shouldn't have anybody buying that would be under a teenager. So we could say if it's under the age of 20, if it's less than 20, they're a teen. Otherwise, they're an adult. Or maybe we could even in the measure create our own ranges. And then that way, if we do that, then the measure actually becomes a separate entity. And then that's something that we could do. So instead of, that would be just like saying, hey, if there are customers, show me all the customers from the state of Tennessee. It would be exactly the same thing, but it would be a measure without adding any additional data. So instead of creating the synonym for teams to this customer age, you would need to create it to, how would you do that? You would need, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay. You might need to create a whole separate column for each age bracket, or you could come in and say, actually, you know what, let's give that a shot. I'm going to come in and say, all right, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to say, show all, or show, I don't need to show, total sales for where customer age is less than 50. So that's one way you could do it, or by age. So you wouldn't be putting it directly in, but you could say, like here, if I came in, all right, so if it's 39, it's $108,000. So I could come in and say customer age equals 38. And well, I think that came to clothing ID. Yeah, I don't want clothing ID. Let's try this. I love it when people make me think.
Could you, you know, like where customer age is, you know, greater than 20, less than 30, something like that?
Yeah, you should be able to do something like that. Is greater than 20 and less than 30. It looks like, though, it's trying to get the age by something, potentially something else. So if this were the case, yeah, see, it's trying to get it by rating and things. Customer age. Yeah, we would probably need to go in and train it so that we could get, actually, let me try doing what they have in here. I like that. Okay.
Customer age again.
Yeah, in parentheses, let me do is equal to, and then what was that 38 I was looking for, right? Or 39? Nope, 38. Okay. So let me change this to 4. No, I don't know where it's getting that. Okay, so this was 39. Oh, so that's what I was looking for. The age of 39. And let's try this. Nope. Let's come in. Let's bringing a whole. Oh, I could have just used that one. I don't know what I was thinking. All right, let's paste that in. Let's get rid of that. Total sales by customer age. Let me try 39 in parentheses customer age, because that looked like how they were doing it. I don't know. That's a good question. Oh, there it is. 39. So that is exact. That is for all of the customers that are 39.
Awesome.
I just learned something new. Yay. So I gotta take a quick picture of that one. Okay, sorry.
So another question for you. If you put synonyms in your data model view, can you search in your fields pane, wait for those synonyms and have it returned?
I don't think so. I've never tried that before. No, you cannot. That's an interesting question, though. I like that. That would be good for the requests, the ideas board they have. I like that.
Kelly, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Michael. Hey, Belinda. This is Aaron Kelly.
Hi.
Really great stuff, and appreciate you sharing. When you were talking about designing your report for the dumbest person in the company, I laughed out loud
You knew who it was, didn't you?
No, well, so I've laughed out loud because I've said that before to some of my clients, and I felt bad after saying it. So I appreciate the joke there. My question is around best practices for design. So kind of along that lines, I've generally shied away from using Q&A in any of my reports, mainly because I don't want to confuse my end users, and you know, it's another pop-up, and then they've got all these questions, and then, you know, all of a sudden they're even more confused, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I don't know if you might have any tips or tricks, or how to best approach making your reports intuitive for the, I'll say it, for the dumbest person in the company,
Right.
to easily navigate and be able to utilize the Q&A feature.
Well, and that's where I'm like, well, after you build out, because I along the same lines, I feel that way too. And yeah, so I've tried to make it the most technologically challenged, but you know, embracing that person is a really win if you're the person who is responsible for implementing and you're trying to get buy-in from end user adoption. That's you know, getting that person to help is usually a big step. But that's where, after you build out what you like, that's why I love coming in and creating, first of all, creating your own questions, and then just simply creating a page of, you know, Q&A options for them. And this is a great starting point for some people. It's like, hey, what do you want to see? So instead of, before you build anything, what is it you want to see? So these are some things I thought you would want to see. Pick from the list and just select it. And if that's not what you want to see, back over it and start again. And so I think these are, and I picked the same one, isn't that funny? So and then telling them, okay, pin it down. And now you've basically built your own report. And then the cool thing is, it's like, all right, as we continue on our journey of doing things, you know, we want to take this and make this a clustered bar chart. We can do that. And then from that point forward, we can keep changing it to being exactly what it is that we want to see, because now it is a regular visual on it, as regular as you can get with a Power BI visual, but it's a regular visual. So this is something where, this is how I like to bring in Q&A, because I kind of get that, you know, implementing ERP systems for so long. I saw so many people that really had difficulty in trying to figure out what they were doing when they were in there. But everybody's used to being in Google. So if you say, hey, this is basically, I use Bing, but everybody else seems to use Google. This is Google for your data. And then it kind of turns a little bit. It's like, you know, that's something I think that can make a change. And I think for someone like you and I, who are really working with a lot of people with dealing with user adoption, although one of my advantages now in what I do is, when I'm dealing with someone who, with user adoption, they're already bought into the concept. And so for you, that's a much bigger challenge, and I totally get that. And I think this is a great way to start out with. If you do data modeling and you get that Q&A tooling up and you get that going for people, I think this is a really lightweight way to make them go, oh, okay, yeah, I can do Google, so I could do this. I haven't tried it, like I said, but I forgot what event, some Microsoft event recently I was at, and the light bulb came on in my head, and I was just like, oh, this is my new go-to attempt the next time I'm working through a customer, through a partner at a customer site, is to try this. And Aaron, I really think this might be something that you want to try to give a shot at, especially to, I used to call him Dumb Dora, but I'm afraid I might offend someone named Dora. So now I usually say grandma, because I'm a grandma and it doesn't offend me. I could do it. So yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's, we could come back to Q&A questions if you guys have more of them. But one of them that's been out there a little bit for a little while is the insights. And I do want to point out that, again, it requires Power BI Pro and Premium, although you might catch some pieces of it in the free. I'm not absolutely really positive about that. But okay, so the if you've ever like had a visual, a clustered bar chart, for example, and you right mouse click on something and you see explain the increase or explain the decrease, this is what we're going to talk about. And you'll see analyze, and then you see it and find out where the different distribution is. So this is what we're going to be working on right now. So let me pull up my next report. Oh, it's the same one. Okay, that makes it easy. There's my insight. Okay, so here I'm looking at the same data, and I'm looking at it by year. And I have this other little matrix over here. And yeah, matrix. Now, this is another reason why I took the time to show you about best practices for Q&A, is because you want to make sure you have these in the right sort order for this. Because when you look at insights, it's always going to compare whatever bar you're looking at. So in this case, I'm looking at 2015 with whatever is just before it. In this case, it's 2014. And I can see I have a decrease. So if I were to right mouse click on that bar chart and go to analyze, I have the option to explain the decrease or find out where the distribution is different. Likewise, from 2011 to 2012, there was an increase. Didn't mean to click on that there. And I go to analyze, I could see the increase. So let's start with the decrease. I'm going to come in and explain the decrease. And then I'm going to get this pop-up. And these are very, very similar to what you see in Quick Insights when you're in the Power BI service. And what this is doing is it's running some algorithms and machine learning in the back end. So there's definitely some machine learning built right in to the desktop to try to evaluate the data to come up with a difference as to why your, in this case, revenue by year went down from 2012 or 2014 to 2015. And in this particular scenario, it's getting very, very granular. So it's telling me, hey, the analysis is there's a 26.16% decrease in revenue between these 2 years. Because again, it always looks at the year before. And then it's getting so granular. In this case, it's like by year by clothing item. So I could see my 2014 number, and then I could see what's causing the difference. So for this item, item 1083, there was actually an increase between the 2 years, and it shows me it was a 700% increase for that product. So even though it's explaining the decrease, it has to explain those big variances too, to be able to explain why the other variances are much greater than we would assume. So like if I look at this one, clothing item 1098, it had a 98% decrease. And so that might be something that I want to look at. So what happened with clothing item 1098? So I might want to continue on my investigation. And it tries to give me text to help explain this as well. Now, because this is still something that Microsoft is getting more and more adept to, if you try this out and you find you like it, just click the positive feedback or the negative one to let them know. And so, and then we could add this to the page if we wanted to, just like another visual, by just simply clicking on that, and that becomes a visual. Now, each of the visuals has, the waterfall is the default visual, but there are 3 other options that are available to us. There is the scattered chart, there's a stacked column, and there's a ribbon. And in this particular circumstance, the stacked bar and the ribbon I find to be too difficult to read. But I do like the scattered chart when you're looking at this, because what is interesting here is everything in green was actually an increase from the year before, and everything in red was a decrease from the year before. This dotted line that you're seeing is based on the history, everything, all of the columns prior to the one I'm analyzing. It determined that this would be where the average is, right? So this is where it should have come. So I can see, well, the average. So like kind of like a trend, I guess. And now I can see, you know, what's increased and what decreased. So I do like this particular one, but you can keep working your way down. Some of these, like year and cost, I don't particularly like, but here's one year and department name. So as I'm looking at this, I can see there is a giant decrease in our tops. And so that definitely is something that I want to pay attention to. So I'm going to turn this one into a scattered plot, and then I'm going to add it. So paying attention to these are, I think, something that you probably want to stop and definitely do. So I'm going to click on that. And once you put them out here, I didn't mean to do that. They do become completely interactive. And so that's pretty cool. So if I click back on 2025, I did a little sales year over year. I can now evaluate some of these. You notice that these are only looking at 2015. Some of them, I will need to go through and select both of them in order to be able to see it. Because if I click back on 2015 when it's here, my revenue, this axis is revenue for 2014, where the top one is revenue for 2015. And without 2014, they're all sitting on the 0 line. So I would need to select both years in order for this to work. Okay. Now, if I were to come back and look at this one, and let's just select everything. If I came back and looked at this one, oh, and if you select everything again, these are still hard-coded to look at revenue for 2014 and revenue for 2015. So you might want to keep that in mind if you add them. So this time I'm going to come in and I'm going to analyze again, and I'm going to say, explain the distribution differences. Now these are going to come in a little bit differently. And in this particular case, I'm looking at, that's one price for one item. Let me scroll down to knits. Okay. So I could also look at knits, sweaters, and dresses. So in this one, I could see my revenue for knits over here on the right, on the left, and on the right, I'm seeing the revenue for everything. So I'm basically just comparing, you can see here, the toggles turn on for comparing proportions. So in the gray, I'm seeing revenue for everything. And I'm looking at this for the whole year as a trend, or for the whole chart as a trend. So I could see each year what knits are doing across the top. And then I could see specific, or the blue one is knits and the other one is everything. So I could see, is knits following the same pattern as everything else? If I turn that toggle off, I'm comparing absolute values. So now I'm seeing knits as they actually fall in the revenue. So there's still the revenue in the gray, but I'm looking at the knits revenue down here. So this is more like a highlight, where this one is, I like this one because it's easier to see how the knits are doing in comparison with everything else. So that's one of the things that I do like. And again, these are something that you could choose to add as you go along as well. And unlike the other ones that were comparing amounts, this is one where you can, it'll follow along and basically show you everything, because we're just looking at revenue for knits and we're looking at total revenue and the year, unlike these where it's looking at specific year. So this one provides a lot of interesting detail as well to analysis if you want to go in and figure out what something is doing. So back on that line, we're really discovering what's happening. And so this is a great way to do that. I'm going to slip to my slides for a moment. Again, this is a preview one. It's been out there for a good while, so I don't know how much is going to change on that, but it always looks at the data, previous data point, which is another reason why you want to make sure you have your column set to in order chronologically as opposed to alphabetically, because it's always going to look at the previous bar. And again, it's running machine algorithms to help you determine what is most likely created the difference between the two. The goal of what is different between the two periods, I pointed out it uses the waterfall as the default. And then I have just an explanation. I'm not going to get into these that tell you exactly what it is you're looking at. If you get the deck, you can look at that yourself. And cardinality is a factor as well. So if there's a lot of large cardinality, it's considered to be less interesting. And so it's not going to have as much of a value. And by that, it's really, you know, like if it's a many-to-one relationship and there's a lot of transactions, it's going to be a lot less interesting. Where anything closer to zero or with a few, it's going to be weighted higher because it's going to be definitely more interesting because there was a change. So if you start with something with zero and then you have a big change in it, then it's going to go, hey, this might be some of the things that really made a difference. So if we sold no product of sweaters this year and then or last year and this year we're selling it like crazy, then it's going to recognize, hey, this is really interesting and this is something that I want to really pay attention to. The size of the population's factored in, and we kind of went, oh, I think that one I had in there twice. There are some limitations in what is not supported on some of the values, so you might want to take a gander at this, and really it's only working with the imported data as well. But I have hope that they're going to continue to add that in, because how cool is that you could just right mouse click and look at some of the things that machine learning is trying to figure out for you. Because one of the problems I think a lot of people have, and Erin, as a consultant, you probably run into this a lot, is that they don't know what to ask. So, you know, it goes back to the we don't know what we don't know, which sounds a little like Yogi Berra, but it's very true. If we don't know what we don't know what to ask. And so it kind of gives us some guidelines as to where we want to get started. As do our next two areas. So I want to move into key influencers, which is definitely one piece that's new. And again, it does require Pro and Premium. And key influencers will help us definitely move up the chart to help us figure out why something has happened and give us enough information that we could do something to change what will happen. And so that's what we're about. So let's go ahead and dig into that. I'm just going to minimize that one and pull up my key influencer Power BI report. And once again, it's opening on the wrong monitor. I am so excited you guys had me look up that age thing. And that is going to be a tiny tip this week. No question. So the Nashville group will get a shout out to that one for sure. Okay, so key influencer, one of the newest visuals that they have. Well,
we got about 8 minutes left.
Okay, thanks. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out, in this data set, we have comment cards from our users. We support tickets and they've evaluated, and we're going to try to figure out why we're getting low, who we're getting low scores from, and what we could do to improve our low scores. So I'm going to come up, I could come up here and go to insert and add the key influencer here, or it is located in, whoop, not that one. There it is. It is located in the visuals, and I'm just going to stretch it out. Now in this particular case, I've added in a couple slicers already on company size, the role of the person in the organization who's filling out the rating, and then I have some ratings here. Okay, so what I want to figure out is, again, who are the low ratings coming from. So I'm going to go to my customer table, which is where my rating is, and I want to analyze my rating. And now I'm going to tell it what I want to explain it by. So I don't know yet. So I'm going to take just a couple stabs at things. So one of them, I'm going to say, all right, the size of the company that the customer works with might be a factor. So I'm going to explain by that. I'm going to open up my device and I might say, oh, the ID, the number of IDs they might have might be, or devices they have might be an issue. What country they're from also might be of issue. What role they are in the organization might be of an issue. And what subscription type they have. And then finally, maybe the number of support tickets they have. All right. And I want to make sure this is doing a count, a distinct count there. Okay. So what I end up with is this visual here, and it is telling me right now the influences are the high. I want to know the low. What are my low ratings? And when I select the low ratings, it tells me right now there's high, there's low, and it gives me this average line, this red line in the middle. And I can see the things that are influencing low ratings. And again, this is all part of machine learning. So the count of the support tickets, how many support tickets we have. So what it's telling me is when the support ticket, when there's more than 2.53 support tickets, I am 4.07 times more likely of getting a low score. And I can click on that and, whoop, didn't mean to click there. I also could see when the role is an organizer, in the company is consumer, I am 2.7 times more likely. And I could see what's happening here. Now, if I come in and say, all right, most of my customers are less than 5,000, what does it look like then? Well, it's still 3 times 0.78 more likely that I'm going to get a low score if I have more than 2.57 tickets, or if they're in France. Okay, so you can do all kinds of really cool evaluations, and it's kind of guiding you and telling you exactly what it is you want to see. I'm going to come into top segments here, and I could see the top different things that are rating things. So if I click here on this 60.09% rating, in this one, there are 60 of the rating is low if they are in France, if the person filling it out is not the publisher. So I want to try to get the publisher of those companies, and if they have greater than 4 support tickets. And I could keep going down on my percentage level, but it's telling me who are some of these people. And as I keep going down and reducing trying to narrow it in, I could see more and more of my ratings. So this is something that's really very cool. Sorry, I'm trying to rush through this because I want to get to my favorite, the decomp tree. But you could see, I know right now, okay, I probably need to focus more attention on my customers that are in France that have greater than 4 support tickets. I probably want to find out what the support tickets are containing. So if I come back over here and I'm looking at, oh, I can even see they're coming from Premier. I don't see theme as being an option here, so it doesn't look like they calculated. Oh, I didn't get the theme in there. No wonder. Let me go. That would be under customer table. Yep. That might change it a little. Yeah. The theme is navigation. So I could come in if I say, all right, for administrators, what do they care about? The theme of the support tickets area is security. So if I want to sell more to administrators, I need to pay more attention to security. That seems to be their biggest area of concern. Also, I should focus on usability, design, reliability, navigation, and speed and support. From governance on down, it seems to be okay. So that's a really powerful tool that you could spend a lot of times just diving into data with. And for those of you that are consultants, that's something I would definitely consider doing with your customers. I'm going to quickly open up the decomp tree and then I'll end at the deck. And I don't know why they keep opening on the other window. But the decomp tree is my new all-time favorite visual. Talk about don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to ask. The decomp tree is a great place to start. And very similar to what we just did with a key influencer, it works very much the same. So this time I'm just going to grab it from down here, and I'm going to load in my decomposition tree. So I have my sales, you can see right there next to it, and my sales by segment and my sales by year. So I'm telling it I want to analyze certain things. Now I'm going to go into sales. I'm going to grab this time a measure that is a percent of growth because I want to analyze my percent of growth. And you can see now I get this little visual right here. I'm going to quickly come in and turn off tooltips because I will not need tooltips on here. And now I'm going to tell it what I want to explain by. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to start with date, bring the date in. And I do not want month or day. I'm only interested in year and quarter. I'm going to grab the country. I'm going to grab the manufacturer. And under product, I've created a product hierarchy that has category, segment, and product. So I'm going to use that. Okay, so this is my whole visual. I'm going to just minimize those. You notice that there's a little plus sign here, so I can see the overall percent of growth. If I click on this, I could pick what of those explain bys I want to choose. Like I might choose manufacturer. And oh, I can see this looks like my top manufacturer. So I'm going to select this one. And then maybe I'm going to do it by year. And now I can see all the support growth of the year. And I could keep working my way down, which is pretty cool. If I come down and choose this Van Arnstel, then I continue on with my journey this way. And I could keep looking at specific information as I go along. So you could move your way around any of these and see very quickly. It's a great interactive experience. Now, if I manually pick and choose those, if I hover up here, there's a lock. So I could lock down a certain level. So someone would have to start at a certain level. Now, what I want to do with this one is this time I'm going to use some AI because I'm going to say, I don't know what to ask. I'm interested in where my biggest amount of growth has been. So I could choose the highest value or the lowest value. If I was looking at the lowest growth, I would go to low value. So I'm going to go to high value. And it evaluates all my explain by and says, okay, of all of these things, which one has the biggest influence over increasing the growth? And it happens to be product. And it's specifically, you can see the dotted line, it is this product. And if I select again, and I choose high again, then it says, okay, and then by quarter. So fourth quarter has the biggest leap for that product. If I select again, high value, then it takes me to this manufacturer. And if I select one more time, I could see this category. So now I can see all of these things. Now, if I wanted to know, okay, so that Maximus 92 is good, but this, I want to know more about this one. Why didn't this one have as big an increase? I'm going to go ahead and just click on this visual. You got to click twice. And I want you to notice that these changed. So the next biggest influence on the increase was the year. So it changed to 2017, and then the quarter, and then the manufacturer. Where if I come back up here, it was quarter, manufacturer, and category. And so that's pretty nifty. If I come over here and look at just the convenience one, it has this highlighted thing, and I don't like it highlighting. I want it to completely change the report. So I'm quickly going to come up to format, go to edit interactions, and make that filter instead of, and then turn that off. So now I'm going to come back in and let's look at everything. Let me go to productivity. And now everything again will change depending on what it is that I'm looking at. So if I choose regular, it put country after product. If I come back to convenience, then product quarter. And so you might want to do the same thing by year, but this is an awesome way to do interactions to figure out what it is that you're looking at and how it, or where your whatever it is you want to evaluate, whether it's sales or satisfaction scores or whatever the case may be, to be able to look at it and let AI help you take part in figuring that out. Pretty darn cool. I, again, direct query on the key influencers isn't there. This one also requires it, but this one's often called the root cause analysis. And so it's really there to help us do some problem solving to try to figure it out. And one of my favorites, that's for sure. Let's see. Those are just some screenshots. The maximum number of levels you could have on a single tree is 50. Wouldn't want to look at that. But, and you could visualize up to 5,000 points on a tree. Again, I don't know that I would want to look at that. And let's see. Okay, so that kind of takes me to the Q&A end piece. before I wrap up and take any questions at the end, I do want to point out, if you get the slide deck, myself and 2 other MVPs, Mariano Gomez and Steve Indo, we do a Power Platform share about once a month. And our guest this week is Wolfgang Strasser from Austria. Wolfgang is a Power BI MVP, and he does a lot with SQL as well. And he's going to be talking about Azure Synapse and Power BI. So I'm super excited about that. It's a very casual thing. It is basically just us hanging out together and letting our guest, or if we have a guest, tell us what they've been working on, or we talk about it. It's just a way to continue to learn like this. So that's it. So Michael, any questions, or if I have any time left?
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. It was just
Okay.
much great content. There were several questions in the chat, and we did get all of those asked. And a lot of, I'm reading the comments, a lot of very positive feedback for you, Linda. So I really appreciate you being here. I'm just going to share my screen. So, so thanks again, Belinda. I just want to point out, Belinda mentioned that she has a YouTube channel, and if you haven't checked that out, be sure and check that out. She has these what she calls tiny tips, and they're really excellent, like bite-sized 2, 3, 4 minute videos with some excellent tips for how to improve your work in Power BI. So it's a great resource, and I really encourage everybody to check that out. So keep in mind that next month, Thursday, October 15th at 11:30, these are all at 11:30, of course, we've got Chris Wagner, who is a Microsoft MVP as well. He's going to be talking about the Myers-Briggs personality types you find in the self-service BI platform. That's going to be really, very interesting. Tuesday, November, and that is, by the way, this is on Meetup right now, so you should have gotten an email this morning. If you didn't, you can go on to Meetup right now and sign up for that one. And then also we've got Tuesday, November 17th, we've got William Butler, and Thursday, December 10th, we have Alberto Ferrari and Megan Longoria coming up in January. So be sure and stay tuned for those presentations. And we're going to stick around and hang out for a few minutes, but we know that people have to get back to work. So thank you guys very much for showing up, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. That was terrific. Sorry, Linda, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just, thank you very much. I just copied the stuff from the chat so I could try to get some answers to you guys. And
so the people in the chat are they're seeing, like, you know, why I wanted you to come present. So they got to see what great content you have for us. I really appreciate it.
yeah. Oh, and so you'll be sending everyone the PDF, right? Oh, you got that. You already said that answer. Oh, I'll have to, someone wrote cool husband since my husband bought me a drink. So yeah, I think we got most everything done. Oh, so yeah, and I think I covered one, only question that I didn't flat out answer was the relationships, inactive relationships. And I answered that one as we went through. So cool. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Linda.
Bye. Thank you.
Hi, Will. Would you guys mind if I ask a silly question?
Sure, go for it.
So the stuff that Brenda showed today looks really, really neat. And do we know, or do we have any access to what's going on in the backgrounds?
As far as the machine learning algorithms?
Yes.
Not really. I know so are you familiar with Dex Studio?
Just very little. I'm more a Python girl myself.
Yeah, I know you can access the machine learning functions and run them yourself, but there's no documentation on what they do. So it's really just meant for the user interface to utilize them. So
It,
you can use them, but there's not really much
I'm
support.
I'm not planning on. I just like to sometimes peek under the hood if I come across a nice shiny car. So
So you can peek under the hood. So there's I think they start with ML dot, and they're in the DAX set of functions. So they actually have machine learning functions in there that are behind the visuals. So if you, I forget how I saw somebody do it, but if you have SQL Profiler,
Mhm.
you run a trace on your instance of Power BI Desktop, and then if you use the visual, you'll see what functions it's using, and that's how you could kind of copy and paste those queries, and that would be your way to get into it and see what it's doing behind
That's
behind the
awesome.
scenes. But
Yeah. No, thank you very much. That was, as always, very insightful, and I learned a lot. Also, I was not aware of the accessibility function in regular Microsoft Office, like the readback that Brenda showed in the very, very beginning.
yeah, that was cool. I didn't know about
That's
that
so
either.
cool. That's actually awesome, because I'm one of those people that just leaves out stuff while writing an email because my head is jumping ahead of my fingers. So
Me too. I think I'm going to turn that button on myself.
that read back function would definitely help with that.
Yep, I agree. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining. Well, I'm going to sign off, guys. Thanks again, Michael, for organizing.
Thank you, Will.
We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.